Hey, Stewart's Chapel, Don Pierson here, and this is Monday's devotion. I'm taking you over to 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9 through 13. 1 Corinthians 8, 9 through 13. Be aware lest somehow this liberty, this freedom of yours, becomes a stumbling block to those who are weak. And there's so much on the issue of the liberty versus the weak. Anyway, that's another time. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? Because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish, for whom Christ died. But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. Now, he doesn't say he stops eating meat. He's saying, though, that if eating it is going to cause a brother, he'll stop eating it. To stumble. There are some things, and this is what I've got this titled as, some things are just dumb. Some things are just dumb to do. Like going into the temple of another god, for one thing, and eating the sacrifice, and everybody's having this feast, and going in there and eating it. Yeah, you got freedom in Christ. You can do that. But that's not real smart. And that's what he's saying. That's not real smart. It's going to cause more pain for somebody else than it should. There's just some things that, though we have freedom in Christ, would just be kind of dumb for us to do. When I was writing this up, I was thinking about probably one of the... Now, my wife would tell you I've done plenty of dumb stuff. But one of the dumbest things I think I ever did was when we were missionaries in Belize. And I had been there a few years, and I should have known better. We had a team that came down out of Texas, a good church in Texas. They had come down, and they had helped us build a church. It was a good week. Most of the team members were college students or young people, but there was one man on this team that was much older than them and even much older than me. Towards the end of the week, this man asked me, he said, I'd like to bring a team. Well, I probably should have done my homework. I said, well, I'll be glad for you to come down. I said, what do you want to do? He said, I'd like to come back here and finish this church. I said, well, I think that'd be a great idea. He said, I'd like for us to live here in the village if we could and finish the church. I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. Well, I probably should have done my homework on the guy. He was a really, really nice guy, and he was a believer. So he went back, and we made the arrangements, and along the way, he told me about the team he was going to bring. It was about 6 men. 6 men, and they were from his reading club. Well, I assumed that reading club meant reading Christian material. Well, it became very obvious when I picked up the team at the airport that if not all of them, several of them weren't believers. Went to the village. We set up a place where they could live. They actually that church at that time had a metal roof on it, the one we were building, so they lived in there. It wasn't being worshipped in. The old thatch roof church was just down below it, and so we would worship in there, and they would stay up there. several of these men were large men. Now, when I say large, I'm not talking about just tall. I'm talking about large men. Maybe the word ought to be heavy, very, very heavy men. Okay? They were all professionals, lawyers, doctors, etc. Thus, the reason they're in this reading club. They had never been among a third world culture, and they did so many things wrong. They arrived on a Friday, I think. Saturday went well. Sunday, we have worship. And one of these very large men, when it came time for worship, came out of the new construction church, wearing shorts. Now, I know, not a big deal, but it was a major deal in that village. He comes out wearing shorts. But if the shorts weren't bad enough for this village, he comes out with a t-shirt that was, let's put it this way, it didn't even come close to covering his largeness. There was more of his largeness outside of his t-shirt than covered up. Now, he didn't come out until almost all of the people in the village were already in there, and we had already begun singing. And as soon as I looked up and I saw him, I said, that's not going to happen. So I slipped around the back and I came to him and I said, you can't come in. He said, what do you mean I can't? You can't come in here. I said, your appearance right now will be a stumbling block for them. Now, he wasn't a Christian. He didn't understand that biblical language, so I had to basically explain, and he was a lawyer, explain to this lawyer why his freedom would be very dumb and offensive to this group. And needless to say, he didn't respond well, and he went back up there, and he stayed up there. And the rest of the week, we didn't get anything out of him. Now, it's one thing for that kind of response to come from a non-believer. But oh my goodness. Sometimes us, I said us, we can really do some dumb things that can really hurt some very young Christians. If we would just think first that it's not all about us. That's what this passage is all about. It's not about your freedom. It's not all about my freedom. You know, I haven't ever figured this one out, and this includes me. How someone will go on a mission trip and they will change and they will sacrifice, do all kinds of change so that they don't offend. And as soon as they get back in the airport or on that plane, they'll do some really dumb things to offend the flight attendant or someone else. Well, that's me. Oh, talking about me. I don't think I'm an exception, though. You done any dumb stuff lately? Does it really hurt anybody? There's some things you need to change. This man in that village actually ended up hurting more with his mouth than he did with his dress. And that tends to be the case, doesn't it? I'm going to leave that with you. Remember, it's not all about you. It's not all about me. Try not to do anything dumb today. Love you, Stewart's Chapel.